what? Those 3 days, they start right now because we have this awesome executive panel for everyone to enjoy. And I'm going to welcome to the stage some terrific executives to have a very cool conversation about external development. We're going to start with Mike Verdu, who's the Senior VP of Electronic Arts Mobile. Come on up, Mike. And I guess we want to put you on that chair right there. Jefferson Valderez, who's the GM and VP of Product Development at Bandai Namco. Woo. Jefferson, welcome. We've got Leah Hoyer, who's the VP of Creative at Telltale Games. First time she's here. And we've also got Rod Ferguson, who is the studio head of the Coalition. Loves chainsaws, this guy.
Who doesn't love chainsaws?
Who doesn't love chainsaws? Welcome, everybody. This is amazing. This is really cool. I've had a lot of fun learning a lot of great things about external development because I just review the video games. I don't know how they're made. And man, they're big. And they're made by lots and lots of people. And what we've done this year is something a little bit different. We actually put the word out to everybody attending, and we got a lot of questions. We decided to take a new approach to this year's executive panel by crowdsourcing the questions from those of you in the audience today. Now, not surprisingly, most of them came from service providers interested in your insights on the business of external development. Now, thanks to everybody out there who submitted these questions. And I think if we can, we've got an hour, and I think if we can get through, getting most of these answered, maybe we'll have time for a few more from the audience. But let's get started, and I will direct the questions a little bit, but there will certainly be some questions that will be for everybody, okay? All right, so let's start with, and I think this is one of those that's for everyone. How key is the practice of external development, otherwise known as outsourcing, to the development of your titles today? Let's start with you, Rod.
We're a AAA title that has a huge amount of content, so it's hugely important. And part of it, we've actually taken beyond the no longer calling it outsourcing for us, so we call it co-development. And so the way that we work with our partners and allows us to scale our team in such a way that we can actually get the kind of vast amounts of content we need to do to have the kind of, when you look at the size of a Gears game from the campaign to horde mode to multiplayer, like it's a large offering, and to be able to create that amount of content in a couple of years requires that sort of co-development.
And now it's all in 4K.
And now on 4K content. Yeah.
Really big file, yes. Now, Leah, Telltale Games is a company that I think a lot of us would probably still sort of think of as a smaller indie studio, but that is definitely not the case anymore, is it?
Yeah, we need to stop thinking about ourselves as an indie studio. And I think that that's a big part of it. 5 years ago, we would be making one episodic game at a time, and now we're making 3, 4 at any given time, and therefore we've had to figure out which to help us scale to that level, which disciplines what parts of the process we can outsource to actually make that possible. We wouldn't be able to create the amount of content that we currently do without outsourcing. Okay.
Jefferson, how about yourself over at Bandai Namco? So many incredible characters and properties and franchises with that company.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of a single game that we do that doesn't have any outsourcing, because we do have a massive studio in Japan.
It's called co-development now, Jefferson.
Co-development.
Right. That phrase was...
I'm struggling to find a game that doesn't co-development, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really like a part of everything. We do kind of cheat on the art side. We create like our own internal outsourcer for art. Like we have this massive studio in Malaysia. That nobody in the company likes to use. How we centralize things and nobody likes it anymore. But it's like everything on every platform. Like we're always using, even our smaller, quote unquote, like low cost location studios use outsourcing. It's not about cost really. It's about the ability to be dynamic and deliver more or less depending on demand. So it's a lot of it is reacting to the market very quickly and being able to have that like dynamic bandwidth.
Awesome. Now, Mike, at EA Mobile, you guys have some of the biggest brands in games, and I noticed that your mobile games, they look like PlayStation 3 games or better. So I would imagine they require a lot of co-development.
Yeah, I wanted to say, first of all, that I jumped at the chance to come and speak to all of you because these partnerships are vital to us. EA Mobile may seem monolithic, but it's actually a collection of small studios spread all over the world. And these small studios are working on some very big products. And they're live services. So the dance that we're in with our players means that we're also in a dance with our partners to generate content, to feed tens of millions of players with new features every day, every week, every month. And so external development is critical, and I think it will grow in importance as we move towards a world where we're serving regionalized live services that are really tailored to every market on the planet. And we're going to need help to do that. That's not something that we can do with a 70-person team in one location. So it's, it's incredibly important and growing in importance over time.
Awesome. Well, everybody here is, using outsourcing and co-development. And there's a second part to this question, which I think is very interesting. Do you look at that co-development as a way to scale up features or to save on development costs, or is it a bit of both?
So from my perspective, external development sort of exists on a ladder of actualization. And at the very base level, there's scale and cost savings. So yes, on a lot of our games, the majority of the art is actually done in partnership with external developers. But as you sort of move up the ladder of actualization, I think I start looking at these partnerships as a way to really get scale that we can't get inside of one studio.
Right.
And then beyond that, it brings a diversity of thinking and an additional creativity, and it kind of injects life into the creative partnership around the products. And not every outsourcing and external development gig that we do is going to reach that very top level of actualization, but it's important to know that it's possible.
Right.
And if you look at my career before coming back to EA, because I'm a boomerang that left EA, went out and had a bunch of adventures on the frontier, and then came back. When I started my own little company, we reached out to external development partners and made them a part of our family, and actually acquired one.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a spectrum, and it's far more than just a way to save money.
Right. Jefferson, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a cost element. Like a lot of our studios are in expensive locations like Tokyo or Bay Area. But we really believe in having studios there because that's where a lot of the talent is. But you also have to fight the right fight. So on art specifically is something that we generally try to do outside, because you don't really need, Bay Area artists to be amazing, but maybe you need the engineer or the product manager, or there are certain skill sets that are very hard to find anywhere else. But yeah, so things you can find in other places, then you can use your dollar better if you kind of focus on and also sometimes it's even just hard to find these people because there's not that many of them where you are. So it's great to be able to look at the whole world for it.
I'm very curious to find out about what Telltale is looking for from co-development partners and outsourcing out there. It must be a little bit different than some of these guys here.
Some of it, I would say I agree with what both of these folks have said. We generally use it for scale rather than trying to do it for cost savings.
Right.
Part of it is just a necessity to get as many episodes as we're putting out into the world done.
Yeah.
Because at one given time, we might actually be working within the studio on as many as 9 or maybe even 10 episodes because of the way they stack. And at certain times, it's not even possible to find enough animators to make that happen in-house, and especially because we're not always making 9 or 10 episodes. Sometimes, certain times of the year, we might only be making 4.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't make as much sense for us to do those full time. And so working with the partners that we found who really understand our franchises is very important. I would say that's pretty key. I came to the video games industry, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, but I came from TV animation originally. And there's a lot of similarities in parts of the process, but one of the things that would happen in TV animation is you would just send over a very precise, hey folks overseas who are going to animate this, do exactly this thing that we're saying.
Yeah.
And that's really not what we're looking for at Telltale. We would love to have partners who come up with a better idea to shoot a scene, to have better emotion and acting in areas. We're really looking for people who are going to come and add to that piece of
That's
it.
a hint, by the way.
Yeah. And so, yeah, when we're looking at it, it's absolutely not really a cost savings. We want to find really good folks who hopefully are crafting the same kind of work and hitting the same bar that we are with the staff that we have full-time
You're
in-house.
kind of in a league of your own over at Telltale. It's like you have your own sort of industry there. There aren't many companies that can do exactly what you guys are doing and certainly have the trust of these huge partners out there. So, yeah, I would imagine that the QA kind of oversight must be pretty intense through all of that. And
Absolutely, and we know there's going to be an investment when you start working with a partner, whether it be someone in the States, in North America, or overseas. And once you've put that investment in, you're really hoping that it pays off in much more of just a service provider.
Yeah.
You really want to find a partner. And
Cool.
so that's a lot of what we've been looking for and trying to grow that part of our business so that we can be consistently good over as much content as we're putting out.
Now, Rod, for probably about 10 or 15, maybe 20 years, people have been telling you how to make your game. So does that happen with your co-development partners? Are you getting lots of feature ideas? Because everybody plays Gears, everybody's got an idea of what's missing from Gears.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the co-development stuff is essentially what they're saying around scaling up teams, because part of it is just availability of resources. And that's the thing where I'm seeing a big change is away from, like, I think where you see the change from outsourcing to co-development is also the change from sort of pure art assembly line to, dynamic range of skill sets doing a dynamic range of things. And so, we've had co-development around service-based engineering or rendering-based engineering or, animation and traditional art and those sorts of things, whether it be 2D or 3D. So what it's interesting as part of that transition from an outsourcer of, hey, here's a spec, go make a piece of art that looks like this, to this relationship now, because of their long-term relationships. I mean, we're, Gears 4, we've been doing it for, 12 years. And so when you find people that you can work with that are talented and interactive and proactive, that you want to grow that relationship so that you're not starting fresh every time. And so, and they get invested and their quality bar goes up, because that's early on, it was all about quality bar. It was like, when I was at Epic, it was like, and even at the Coalition, here's our quality bar. Can a partner achieve that or not? And once you find a partner that achieves that or even exceeds it, then it's how do you develop that relationship and keep working with them so it becomes a two-way street.
Right.
But it's that broadening now of skills and availability, because it's just, even being in Vancouver, like finding enough service engineers, finding enough rendering engineers, finding like core skills you need on your team to grow is hard in some areas. And so finding those partners elsewhere is important.
So that was a great first question. That was awesome. All right, okay. So what are, let's go to the second one. What are some top criteria your teams consider when shortlisting or choosing an external partner for an engagement? Let's start with you, Leah.
Oh, I would say certainly quality, like looking at what they've done for other studios, what they can show us that they're doing. Flexibility is a big part of it, because part of the real draw, as we were talking about before with outsourcing, is knowing that you've got the ability to be much more agile about the way that you're producing your games.
Yeah.
And so that's, and really then the commitment to wanting to truly be a partner. Telltale has its own proprietary engine, and so that also sometimes presents a different layer of just somebody has to be able to come in, really commit to understanding how to work in that environment.
Yeah.
And what they can, if they're coming in and feeling committed and feeling like they're partnering and they're really putting forth that effort and wanting to be better, I think that's something that we're always really looking for is who's going to give that commitment to trying to be part of our team and really understand the way we do it rather than do the same service that they do for every company.
How do you let them go when you get them to that point? How do you share them? Because a lot of these external teams, they work with lots of partners and they've got to split their focus. But when you find that magic, how do you say, yeah, go on and work with Sony now for a little while? Like, how do you deal with that?
It's painful sometimes, especially once you know you've got a great team, and if you can't give them the work all the time, obviously it's a reality. We don't expect that folks are going to sit around not doing anything.
Yeah.
However, we're trying to also be creative about, is there a project that we would love to maybe start investigating as a side project of something we could see coming out down the road? And sometimes that pool of folks helps us do that. And so we're trying, now that we've found a few studios that work really well with us, we're trying to do more to make sure that relationship lasts longer.
Awesome. Jefferson, what are some top criteria your teams consider when you're choosing an external partner?
I mean, I've done a lot of, this kind of work on both sides. I also had my own company doing work for others, and I think what I found the best predictor of that something's going to work is, have they done this before? Like, it's the main thing we look for. Or I'd say, like, if I had to boil down to one, is like, we don't want anybody who's going into this like doing it for the first time, because then they're going to be learning with us. Right. So I don't want to pay them to learn.
You want other people to train them for you, and then
it's very reasonable. That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Right. So the reason why I'm paying you is because you should know what you're doing. So unfortunately, it's not always you can find like people who have done exactly what you want. But that's the one thing we always try to find, and we definitely prioritize that over almost anything else. And then of course there's considerations as in culture. I mean, it really depends on the work, right? So like, there's cultural implications, like do they understand the content? Some stuff you can do anywhere, some stuff you can do it like, it's hard to do in India or different places which have a different video game background than other countries. Right?
Is there a commonality with, a successful external development partner? Like maybe they've tried to develop their own game and it just didn't work out. They couldn't see it to completion, but they learned a lot of skills that were very useful and applicable to what you're looking for? Yeah,
definitely. I think having gone through the whole cycle, a lot of people don't understand how important ship is. So you get 80% of the way there, you probably learn like 30% of what you can, right? Like when you get the last 20%, that's when you get the other 70%.
Of the way there, you learn 30% about. Would you guys all agree with that?
It's a little low on the 30%, but there is definitely something about shipping, right? And so I agree with that whole notion of like how you people are going to learn. I think part of it is like for an indicator is a company or a partner is willing to invest in their team.
Yeah.
And that's what we look for as one of our things is the training, like the notion that they're investing. It's not an assembly line warehouse of people that they're just sort of selling services out from.
Right.
It's this notion that it's an actual company that is investing in its people, and there's training going on and investment in the people. And so when you see that the company's giving back to their artists, then you know that that's a place you want to continue to work with.
Yeah, because this is a constantly moving freight train of an industry that is always evolving and changing. So if you don't work with partners that are adapting to all of those change, you're sort of stuck.
Yeah, and we're the exact opposite in some ways, because we work with a kind of an industry standard engine.
Yeah.
So having Unreal Engine 4, that's one of the things where we can now go out and look for, hey, are there people who are already working in this engine? And that's one of the things I think that is going to be something that's going to be interesting as we think about long term for the industry is how do we think about, proprietary or, bespoke technologies versus sort of universal technologies, right?
Awesome. We'll talk about engines in a second here, but Mike, what level of proactiveness would you expect from an external partner with whom your team is working with? Can you offer some examples?
Well, I think the majority of the work that we do at EA Mobile is actually in live services. So these are games that potentially could live 7 or 10 years. And, and so you've heard the cliche, it's a marathon, not a sprint, but really it's not even a marathon. It just goes on and on and on.
It's life.
It's life.
It's just going on until you die.
The paradox is at the same time that you have to react very, very quickly to conditions in the game and the cadence of content that you need to put out for your players happens on different timelines that all work together. So daily, weekly, quarterly, and then for the really big beats that change the game in a profound way that might be 6 months or a year. So you need a partner that's really in it with you and is proactive in the sense that in a business where the velocity is very high, if there's a problem or a clarification needed, that you're just on it. Like you're on it as a team.
What specific games are you citing as you're thinking of the amount of work sort of needed there? Because I'm thinking NBA Live, which you refresh every year. I'm thinking Need for Speed and things like that, which have a shelf life. But
Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, which runs out of our Capital Games studio in Sacramento, They make server updates every week. They ship new characters in a matter of every few weeks. They're working on events and game-changing features that launch anywhere from weekly to monthly to over a quarter. And you can almost think of this studio team as multiple teams all working on different beats on different timelines that all have to come together in this seamless live service. And you look across our portfolio, SimCity Build It out of Track 20 in Helsinki, Sims Free Play out of Fire Monkeys in Australia, Real Racing out of Fire Monkeys in Australia.
Right.
These are services that have been running for years.
Right. Real Racing 3 has been around for, what, 6 years now or something?
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
incredible. Okay, sometimes external partners can encounter challenges with their developer client. For example, documentation is incomplete or inexistent.
What?
Never.
Or perhaps,
We're sorry. Yeah.
or perhaps the client isn't providing, I think I'm supposed to admonish you or something. Like you guys go report to the principal right now. Isn't providing feedback on work in a timely manner. Do you have suggestions on how does the person that asked this want to stand up? On how external partners could raise concerns without jeopardizing the relationship? Good question. Rod Ferguson.
Obviously, part of it is being constructive and finding a way to do that in a proactive and constructive way.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is we have the way that we structure ourselves, and we have dedicated people to co-development. And they're, as Dilbert likes to say, they're the United Nations for co-development, where they can go and talk to directly. And so it's not. It's a place to go where it's safe to have those sorts of discussions, you know, because I think part of it is that proactivity of growth of process. Because one of the nice things, if you have an established partner, they're working with more than one company. You're not only working for you, they're working for a bunch of different people. And so if I'm working with a partner that Leah is working with, and they find that Leah's process is way better than our process, which I'm sure it is. Which I'm sure it is. You know, it would be great for that person, you know, for that team to say like, hey, rather than just sort of complaining or living with what we're doing, to be able to say like, this is a partnership, and this to be part of that feedback loop is, hey, we've been working a different way with someone else that we think is better.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it, right?
Oh,
And have that
cool.
relationship. So I think it's about the strength of relationship and feeling open, that the team is open to constructive criticism. And we all want to be more efficient.
Yeah.
Like this is the thing about finding new ways to do co-development, and we talk about it, the team talks about it all the time. And so the idea that there's a problem, there's an issue, if they're afraid of doing it and it's really just a downward, you know, as they say, you know, it all goes downhill. If that's the relationship, that's not a partnership. And so finding a way that you can have a communication, open communication is important.
Chris, I think next year we got to have like a Dr. Phil therapy session up here.
Yes.
We need some external developer or executives up here as well. All right?
Because on top of it, that was an awesome answer, and I agree with everything there. And the truth is, we know. Like, we also just know that
Yes.
some of our
'Cause you have your own
documentation and the
stuff.
communication
Yes.
isn't as strong.
It was
and
a hypothetical
bringing
for
it
me
up-
because it's never happened.
Yeah. Bringing it up isn't going to be seen as a negative. It's the attitude that you come to it. Is it about problem solving and making it better?
Jefferson, anything to add on
I mean,
that?
just the, you know, being upfront, like with any issues, and, you know, like even saying, hey, you know, I got this documentation, doesn't look too complete, you know, this might cause us like, you know, spin the wheel a little bit, like, is anything better? Should we talk about it, or should we just roll it and see how it goes? Just being upfront about the problems, like, as soon as possible. Like, I think the worst thing, you know, like a partner can do is like hide the problem and then not talk about it, and then like it comes up like weeks later.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we can deal with problems. Like, I actually love when people bring me problems as soon as they happen. Like, if people like hold to them and like don't do anything for like weeks, and then I find out, then that's when I get like crazy, right?
There's a level of responsibility and trust that's built when you have a partner like that.
Especially if there's a recommended solution. Like, I like problems with recommended solutions as opposed to just problems. I mean, I'll take the problem if that's all I have, but I would love to have some recommended solutions on there.
But let's move on to our next question. There are occasions when a developer like yourselves may suddenly decide to shut down or delay production on a project, and this can have a significant impact on their external partner's business. Is there a way that the partner can be given a preemptive heads up to help them plan accordingly, or is this just a risk external partners need to plan for? Mike?
Yeah, so it's pretty uncool to just get a lightning bolt out of the blue, and I understand and have tremendous empathy for partners who are in that situation. And I would certainly encourage the teams that are in my world to treat their partners as partners. And, you know, in some cases, we don't know that we're going to get hit with a lightning bolt out of the blue. There are external circumstances that force difficult decisions that can happen very quickly. But that doesn't relieve us of the obligation to treat our partners as partners and mitigate the effects of those changes. So I think what you'll hear from me is a spirit of engagement for wanting to deal with problems like that, and admission that if somebody gets poleaxed with no mitigation and no warning, that's really not an acceptable way to work.
Yeah. It is a volatile business, and things happen all the time, and I think there's an appreciation of that. But what I have noticed, even in my short time being exposed to external development, is that it is becoming a more upfront partnership.
Move fast, do the right thing, and that ultimately will serve you well. It's like you can't avoid the breakage in some cases, but what you can do is be humane about the effects.
Right. I think we're all kind of in agreement on that one. Yes? Yeah. All right, let's move on to question number 6. These are great questions, by the way. Really nice. Thanks for taking part in that. Not to get too political, I think you wanted this one, Rod. But how do you think America's new foreign policy will affect our ability to engage great offshore partners in the next 5 years? And how do you see any regions benefiting and emerging with new opportunities as a result? Very pertinent question. Leah.
Thanks. To be honest, I'm not entirely certain. I think, we don't have the crystal ball that's going to say, oh, things are going to be closed off more. I don't actually see that happening necessarily in terms of closing off the ability to work with companies overseas. And I hope I'm right on that level.
Yeah.
I do think that really at the end of the day, the companies here in North America are going to be fighting to work with really quality partners.
Right.
It's in the best interest of our business to be working with a strong partner, whether they be in our own country or whether they be overseas. And so if you're doing great work and we have a really good partnership, we're going to make all the sort of steps that we can to hopefully keep that relationship going and keep it strong.
It's an international business, and you need to sell these products everywhere, and it just doesn't make sense to close borders on imagination like this, right?
Yeah, but honestly, that's a little bit how the world is going. I notice it's getting more complex, whether it's like copyright or like there's a lot of like more moving parts than used to be.
Wow.
Like all the agreements get more complex, and
You're bumming us out, Jefferson.
Yeah, really.
That's the world right now, though, isn't it? Again, I guess we have to kind of navigate through that right now.
Right.
Mike, are you noticing anything like that?
Certainly, as was observed, there are some unfortunate trends globally that are making it harder to do business, but I think it's incumbent on all of us to push back on that to the degree that we can and keep the flows of information going. And I certainly feel like for the U.S. policy specifically, it's not stopping us. It's not changing our path.
You're all welcome to relocate to Canada, by the way. So we're happy to have more studios in Canada if you guys want to come.
Yeah, there's lots of room, just not in Vancouver.
Yeah, spread out a little bit, that'd be nice. But.
All right, if external development suddenly stopped for games production, how would it impact your titles? Could you grow your internal teams and meet that demand? Jefferson, we'll start with you.
No.
No. Yeah. Does that sound like a horrifying nightmare?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, like if that happened, we would definitely like do less things because there's no way like you can like grow and match it up, right? Like particularly if you want to keep the quality and do the right thing. So yeah, it's just like you need it. And then like I mentioned, like I can't think of a single project we're doing that doesn't involve like that in some way.
The analogy that I have, and you guys have way more insight and have a much better kind of inside look at all this, but with filmmaking, you don't have to create the world every time you make a movie, like the world exists for you. And there's a lot of things that are already set up for you. But with video games, and increasingly in higher fidelity, you have to build everything every time, and it has to be fresh and cooler than the
And
last
when
time.
you work with a TV writer to have a elderly man and elderly woman look at this photo, and I was like, we're not making the elderly woman. And he's like, what are you talking about? I need this couple to see this. And I'm like, she's like 6 weeks to make, and she's on camera for 3 seconds. You're not getting rewrite it so it's just the guy. And he was like, okay. You know, and it's like, so that notion of like not being able to draw an extra off the corner and say, get, you know, you're a background of my character. Like we have to make you.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of extra work for sure.
Yeah.
But I think the question, you know, it's a kind of a double question, right? One is like, if you lose the ability to do external development, what does that mean? And I think for Gears in particular, for us, we could scope down or lengthen our projects. Like we wouldn't be like, oh, Gears is done, we can't do external development or we can't do co-development.
Right.
But if you were to say, hey, co-development is no longer a practice in the industry, and then now it's jump ball on every artist in the world to go try to hire them, I think then finding resources that would be harder, right? And it's because there wouldn't be those shared resources. So
And how would you educate a consumer public as well, right? Because they have gotten used to this kind of cycle of new products as well.
Oh, totally.
They
would
wouldn't
be-
care
it would
that
be
we have
chaos.
our excuses. They would just
Yeah.
flame us tremendously.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's, you know, it's absolutely, we are responsible for hitting a bar and putting out a certain amount of content on certain timelines.
Right.
And it's essential. Having those
Luckily,
partners
luckily
is
for most
essential.
of us, they
You
would
hear that?
generally
You're
blame
essential.
EA,
Essential. All right. Anything to add on that, Mike?
No, absolutely. I think some of our live services would grind to a halt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that the growth in AR and VR is going to result in an increase in the demand from developers for high-quality 3D assets? If so, when do you think we will start to see that increase? Jefferson, we'll start with you.
So our approach to VR has been, I mean, we're a crazy company compared to most companies because we have, you know, restaurants and pachinko parlors and everything, right? So like we've done a lot of like location stuff. So in Japan, you can go and have, you know, a VR experience in a room or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
We aren't doing a lot of consumer stuff, but I'm sure that point's going to come. Yeah, I guess like, you know, as the quality gets to that level, I mean, right now you really don't need like super high quality assets.
See, I threw it to you because I wanted to know if you were working on AR and VR. Thank you. You answered that. Mike, there is no way that cell phones are not going to be involved in AR content. Pokemon Go kind of changed the whole world there as EA. Are you ready to make a comment about how much AR and VR is going to impact your...
I can't really make an EA-specific comment, but I will say generally the trend is towards higher fidelity and more, and that will certainly affect the mobile landscape. As to when, I don't know. I think it's a few years yet, actually.
Yeah. Has Telltale moved into VR?
No, I think it would be an interesting thing for us to be doing, but right now we don't have any products. You know, but the storytelling and creative landscape, it's
Could
a
be
new, interesting
really cool.
problem.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, most video game companies are going to have some sort of arm doing VR or AR in the near term. But when that actually hits a kind of a tipping point where it's not the in-house Skunkworks team working on it and finding that place where we really start to feel that we're working with external partners. Yeah, it's hard to say when that'll happen. I don't think it's next year. I think it's still a few years away, but right now all signs point to yes.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm a huge Batman fanatic, so I'm just imagining the Arkham VR that Rocksteady did fused with your Batman, Telltale. If anybody wants to put that pitch together. All right.
Well, let's have coffee.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have, from a Microsoft or Gears of War coalition thing, I can't really speak to it, but I think what you do see in the industry is like when indie gaming has sort of changed, right? Like I think what the indie game and continues is this pixelated, hey, what's the lowest, easiest art to make to get my experience across? Yeah. And I think what you're seeing is a kind of a revolution in indie gaming where VR has now become the leading edge, where it's now the indie game. Like you see a lot of 3-person VR studios and 5-person VR studios. And VR doesn't kind of work with let's do a retro pixelated character.
No.
When I need a 3D character to make that experience. And so I do think, like, again, I don't know, I think we need to get away from, you know, goggles and matrix cords at the back of our heads to make this mainstream. But I do think as indie goes from pixelated experience, or, you know, that art style to a VR, AR art style, you will see more demand for high quality, especially, you know, because it's this far from your eyes. Like, it has to be higher quality once we can get the as resolution and frame rate up on the VR devices.
So no Gears VR announcement today. Okay, all right, okay. And then we've got the Musk Ask highlighted question here. Looking into your crystal ball, what do you think are the biggest opportunities for external development yet to come? For example, are there emerging critical path areas within your projects that would benefit from increased external development? Mike?
So in my opening remarks, I alluded to the concept of regionalized live services, and this is something that stems from, I think, conventional wisdom around taking games to China. Everybody's like, oh yeah, well, if you're going to take a game to China, it has to be culturally localized to appeal to that market. And I think there's a sort of this trend towards games that appeal everywhere, so that the idea that you can take a Western game and culturalize it may not be as powerful as saying there are games that have DNA that can work in every market. But at the same time you're seeing that trend, you're also seeing a trend towards serving individual countries and cultures very specifically and very carefully. And we've been doing experiments with SimCity in China and in Japan that point the way towards a future where you could serve individual markets in France, Germany, Italy, and Europe, or in Latin America, or in territories in Asia, with content that's very relevant to audiences in those markets. And there is no way that a 70-person studio in Sacramento is going to be able to do that alone. We're going to be looking towards partnerships with you guys to help bring that to life.
Can you give us an example with SimCity? Like, what would that mean? Like buildings set in Japan or famous landmarks or something? Or?
There are individual structures and elements for the game, but much more than that. There's the merchandising around how we present items for sale to the player. There's the way the events work, because events are just an absolutely key component of live services, and the event structure and the cultural context for those events in Japan is just very different than it might be in the United States.
Gotcha. Jefferson, what are your thoughts about looking into a crystal ball for external development?
Definitely, I see the need for, like, at least from our point of view, like, we work with a lot of like teams making full games. So we also do like, art outsourcing and stuff. But like a lot of our games are done with, full partnership with another studio. Those used to be, like a fire and forget thing. You make a game's done, and then you never deal with that. Well, I mean, you make another game with them, really. But now it's more like these long-term engagements where you make a game with someone, and then they run the game for another 5 years. I mean, we prefer to run the game with the team that did it originally, rather than just take it and run somewhere else. We might take it later, but at least during the first few years. So definitely these longer relationships, like on a single product, are becoming more of a thing. So it's not when you sign up a partner, you're potentially signing up to work with them on a single thing for like 7 years.
And would you encourage external development studios that are focused on particular disciplines to maybe, if they have ambitions of their own, to approach a person like yourself to pitch you on new ideas and stuff?
Yes, particularly if they've done it before.
If they've done it before, yes, that's the qualifier. Yeah. And Leo, what's in your crystal ball when you look for it?
I would say, I'm passionate about an overall very integrative, immersive experience. And I think that most comes from all of the different disciplines and the different components and people who are working on it feeling like they're united behind a vision and that they are working toward the same thing. And I think the nice trend that I'm seeing in sort of external partnerships is finding ways to have those folks truly feel like they are part of your internal team. And I think the more we're doing that, the more successful those relationships are going to be, and just the better that the products are going to be. I think there's always been a really interesting divide where, the core of my job is actually mostly the writing, the design, that sort of early creative aspects. And those have always kind of, for whatever reason, seemed fairly off limits for external partnerships and outsourcing. In a lot of ways, you might hire one person, but you hope that writer or whomever it is comes and embeds with you. But I feel like if an external studio can really start to feel in many ways like they're part of the core studio. There's no reason that even some of those
It's
elements
worked for Hollywood for a long time.
that they can't be more integrated, but it's really going to take effort on both parties to make sure that they're doing what they can to sort of create an atmosphere of understanding true partnership. Like, I just think there's a partnership for hire, and then there's really that level where you get to a place and you say, these are people on our team working with us. And the more, like, I think we're excited to find those people.
Yeah.
And the more that studios really are proactive about pushing for that kind of role and show that they want to understand not just what is that incremental job that they've been handed next, but okay, what is this season about? Who are these characters and how can we better understand that? Like, from a Telltale perspective, if there were people in a studio that we're working with in Vietnam who wanted to really get a download of, let's understand, Selena Kyle better, I'd be like, yes, that's awesome, because what you're going to get from that performance is much stronger. And I would love to see those potential relationships truly, therefore, be an extension of the team.
Very cool.
And we'd all like to get more about Selena Kyle, by the way. Don't limit that to just Vietnam. I think we'd all want more of that.
You just started tripping on Selena Kyle.
I did. I mean,
Like, oh,
how can
she's
you not?
awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it the Michelle Pfeiffer Selena Kyle?
Probably,
Yes,
actually,
yeah.
I'm not old. So I think, I alluded to it earlier, like, I think a big part of the crystal ball stuff is around diversification of roles. It's not about just art anymore. And I think that, like, the notion of service engineers or rendering engineers, or just taking it to more of a studio thinking, like, what are all the different types of roles you want in a studio besides just an art outsourcer, quote unquote.
Right.
But I think the other part too is, like, I'm trying to pitch how Xbox is kind of changing the world for a second, is the changing technology allows you to have higher res assets for the game, which in the past it was this notion of, like, I'm going to make a game and I'm going to have these pre-rendered cinematics that would be much higher quality. Like, let's get a blur cinematic in between my gameplay, and so what you get is a good-looking game, and an amazing cinematic and a good-looking game.
Yeah.
And now that the games can be rendered at 4K, now you can actually, if you go with that model, you can actually, when you go to 4K, the game looks better than the pre-rendered cinematic.
Yeah.
And so what you want are real-time cinematics, and so that when you go from, say, the Xbox One to the Xbox One X, that the game looks better and the cinematics look better too.
Yeah.
And so I think finding ways to work with co-development partners to do real-time cinematics and not just look at these sort of fire and forget, here's your script, go do pre-rendered cinematics. It'd be really important to work with the game teams to allow for the entire game to improve with quality as the hardware underneath it improves.
When do you think we get better than photoreal? When we're talking 8K renders?
Yes. Well, I think 4K is pretty close. You start going into where you start to, I think Colin's a better person to answer this question as our CG soup, but the notion around, I think it gets to where you start to top out at resolutions where you start to really pick up on refresh rates, like getting to 120 hertz and that kind of stuff, and getting that responsiveness that goes with that photoreal.
I'm wondering if any of you have talked with an external development person that's bounced around in the games industry a lot, maybe worked in studios and stuff, and has shipped products and understands all of that, but maybe feels a little more fulfilled because of the changing nature of the role that external development kind of presents to them. They're not constantly working on an iteration of a franchise. They are in this world for a bit. They're on that world for to me, that seems a little more analogous to the way a DOP might work, or the way focus puller or somebody in the film industry might look at their career. They don't know where they're going to wake up and what their role is going to be that day, and that's part of the engagement with it.
Don't look at me, because we're all gears all the time.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's certainly one of the things that I love about my job, and previously when I was at Xbox, I was on a central team working with a whole bunch of different franchises, and I love that aspect of it, so I could absolutely see that being a real draw to being folks that are, working with external, on the external side. But since I don't do it, I can't really speak for them. But absolutely, certainly there's a fun part of that comes with the variety, but of course that always comes with potentially more up and down and that sort of thing.
You can see a future as this sector of the industry grows where they're going to be, the people that work with so many teams, they're going to be some of the most disciplined and experienced people working in games.
Yeah,
because
it's like,
they're gonna
you know,
have a
with
taste.
advertising, you have like an agency model, and then you have the
Yeah.
internal client model, like same thing. Like, you know, people go to agencies because they're very good at what they do, but they never see the thing to completion, like the companies
I
do.
mean, what a change, right? Like they're going to go from being this art outsourced thing and making backgrounds and things like that, and a copious amount of, to being like fully, I think, instrumental in the way that games are conceived and shaped very soon. Yeah, it's exciting. That's why XDS rocks, man. I learn more about this side of the business every year. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for joining us.